In America, if you believe all men are innocent until proven guilty, you are incredibly mistaken. The Constitution of the United States, the Declaration of Independence, nor any other founding document of our nation provides us with this mythical protection. Where then do we get this notion that we cannot be found guilty of a crime without proof of our guilt? It comes from an 1895 U.S. Supreme Court ruling in the case of Coffin versus the United States. The decision set a precedence that in any United States courtroom, a person must be presumed innocent until proof beyond reasonable doubt has been provided. That sounds good, right? If that principle was fully adhered to, our nation's citizens would be free from wrongful prosecution. Unfortunately, our government has found a loophole to this precedent. Any American citizen can be found guilty of a crime without ever stepping foot inside of a courtroom. This verdict can remain on an innocent person's record for as long as 30 years, without any credible proof. Even though the stories you are about to read are true, the names of all involved individuals have been edited or removed to protect the privacy and safety of everyone involved. Great evils are taking place in the United States of America. Christians are being persecuted, traditional families are under attack, and private schools and homeschooling families are being targeted. Our government has created agencies which have no oversight, which are being permitted to operate above the law in order to carry out this form of what some might refer to as legal discrimination. A couple of years after I began mentoring at-risk boys and working with kids in our church, I felt compelled to do more. God was softening my heart for young people. Contacting a local foster care agency, I was happy to discover it was possible for a single man to become a foster parent. My heart beat for making a difference in the lives of kids whose parents had tragically died, of kids who felt unwanted and unloved, of kids who would appreciate someone putting a roof over their heads. Miss Brown, a divorced social worker related to the owners of the company through a botched marriage, acted as a recruiter for the agency. She had no hesitation about approving a single man to foster, but conveyed concerns about me being a born-again child of God. She scolded, "I don't want you to cram your religion down the throats of any children we might place in your home." When asked for clarification, Ms. Brown retorted, "Some Christians tell people they will go to hell if they do this or that, and these kids have been through enough." A few weeks later, Hilda called with shocking news. "Nehemiah, you didn't hear this from me, but do you know David's back in foster care?" Supposedly, his behavioral problems had started occurring again. The DHHR worker determined the child would be better off in foster care. I asked why he was not placed back in my home, where he had already proved he could thrive. Hilda claimed she didn't have that information. After perusing laws and regulations regarding the foster care system, I contacted Carolyn, David's legal guardian with the DHHR. According to the laws I've read, foster children are not supposed to be bounced from home to home without just cause. David was living with his biological family and doing poorly. He moved into my home and did quite well. He was returned to his biological family when I told you all he wasn't ready. Now you've thrown him into a brand new environment with a brand new set of rules, with a brand new school, and a brand new community. Why?" Carolyn claimed she hadn't realized my foster home was available. She just assumed I had already taken in other kids. A court date was coming up, and she invited me to attend. Carolyn said David and his parents would be there, and all of us would have an opportunity to express our concerns. Before accepting her invitation, I called David's mother and asked her if she wanted David back in my home. She indicated she felt that would be in David's best interests. When I got to the courthouse, David's mother, Trish, and his sister were waiting in the lobby. David's mother looked terrified. Trish said the DHHR had told her David was on his way there with his new foster parents. When it was time for the hearing to start, Trish again asked the legal guardian where her son was. Carolyn apologized, claiming his foster parents called and were running late, but would be there any time. When we entered the courtroom, Carolyn sat near the front. David's mother and I were told to sit near the back. The magistrate looked over some reports Carolyn had given and asked her some basic questions. Carolyn said she felt David would benefit from staying in his present foster home. She never mentioned that I nor his mother had any concerns about him being in a brand new environment. She never told the magistrate his mother or I wanted to speak. She never asked for the hearing to be continued so David could have a chance to express his opinion. With such limited information to work with, the magistrate had little choice but to make a decision in agreement with Carolyn, and that David would remain in his new foster home. Sadly, magistrates across the nation allow the DHHR and CPS agencies to run their courtrooms. If a social worker places a piece of paper in front of a magistrate requesting children to be removed from a home, that request is almost never denied. What CPS wants, CPS gets. When the hearing ended, I waited on Carolyn in the hallway and asked why she had not given me a chance to speak. She claimed, "The magistrate asked if anyone else in the room had anything to add." David's mother interjected. He most certainly did not. At that point, Trish asked why her son was not in the courtroom. Carolyn said, I told you he's running late. He'll be here any minute. That was my breaking point. I said, is he really? Or are you lying about that too? I drove an hour out of my way to be here, and you didn't even tell the magistrate I wanted to speak. Then you lied about the magistrate offering to let us express our concerns. If I would have spoken out of turn, I would have been found in contempt of court, and you know it. Carolyn said, I don't have to keep standing here. You all won't listen to one word I say. She turned her back and started walking away through the crowded lobby. I hollered after her, the reason we won't listen to you is because you are nothing but a big fat liar. On the same medication topic, one evening I had to call the foster care agency's crisis line because a boy seemed to be out of his mind. He was running around the house, yelling, screaming, throwing things, and acting as if he was going to hurt me and other foster children in the home. The case manager I contacted asked if the child had already taken his clonidine for the evening. When my answer was yes, she instructed me to give him half of another pill to see if that would help. I told her I wasn't comfortable doing that, but she insisted I do it. So, with her being my superior, I did what I was told. She stayed on the phone with me and heard him continuing to act out. She said, that's not doing the trick. Give him another whole pill. The pattern continued to the point that I believe he was probably given 3 complete pills above that which he was prescribed. Isn't that a case of a trained social worker abusing her power and forcing a foster parent to over-medicate an innocent child? Shouldn't she be charged with maltreatment? One of the boys I worked with was very well behaved in the foster home, except for when it came time to do his homework. When I would try to make him do it, he would rip up his papers or wad them up in a ball and throw them at me. He would throw his textbooks across the room, laugh out loud hysterically, or throw a temper tantrum and insist he would not do his work. No matter how he acted out, he would receive consequences accordingly. I must add here that consequences given to foster children are not very effective. The government has so many limitations on how foster children can be disciplined that the children in the system quickly learn that they do not have to accept consequences, and the worst thing that's going to happen to them for noncompliance is changing foster homes or having more medicine pumped into their fragile little bodies. Anyway, the case manager said I was wrong to fight with the foster child about doing his schoolwork. Her words were, if he wants to fail, just let him. He'll learn his lesson when he has to repeat the 5th grade next year. She actually told me the boy would not be able to remain in my home unless I stopped trying to make him do the homework he was refusing to do. How is that not educational neglect? The next day, we began the process of selecting an attorney and doing our research. The things we learned were astounding. First and foremost, our school was not necessarily investigated because of Paul running away and making allegations. When he was taken into the police's custody, it just so happened that one of the officers was married to a high-ranking atheist CPS worker. The officer told his wife information about the child and about our Christian facility. Shouldn't that be a conflict of interest? Anyway, the police officer's wife insisted on a full investigation of our academy. We also found out that Rhonda, the CPS supervisor who visited our campus on multiple occasions, had posted information on her personal Facebook wall about removing children from our facility. How is that legal? Rhonda did not have a degree in social work, but instead her degree was in criminal justice. Wouldn't you think that in order to supervise other social workers, a person should have some experience as a social worker themselves? Rhonda had a history of mental health ailments and had been struggling to overcome anorexia. She did not like men because at her father's funeral she discovered he had been cheating on her mother. How do we find these things out? Let's just say we knew a lot of people as a result of the type of ministry we were involved in, and people talk. Aside from Rhonda, we found out there is nothing illegal about Child Protective Services employees, police officers, detectives, or any other government officials lying to American citizens about their rights. As long as it does not occur in court, lies being told by the government are perfectly legal. If an American citizen does not know their rights and falls for the deceptive practices of the government, and then any government agent finds anything at all they decide to use for evidence against the citizen, they can use it because the citizen gave them permission to enter their dwelling. Fighting CPS was pretty much pointless. According to the criminal defense attorney we paid a $5,000 retainer fee to, if we filed an appeal or challenged Child Protective Services, there was a huge risk that CPS would talk to the prosecuting attorney about having us arrested out of spite. He told us CPS was known to use such tactics as a maneuver to keep people from rising up against them. The steps to file an appeal were ridiculous. We would have to first contact the CPS supervisor, which in our case was Rhonda, the same worker who had been on our property and who had made the decision to kidnap our students, and tell her why we felt the decision had been made in error. If we were unable to come to an agreement, then we would have to ask for a hearing. This hearing would not be held in a courtroom, but within CPS. That is, if we had not been arrested by the time of the hearing. We would have to have filed an appeal within 60 days of the date the children were removed from our custody. If we missed that 60-day deadline, we would lose all rights to an appeal. Do you know how difficult it would be to file an appeal without having any paperwork from the state that actually documented the allegations that were supposedly made against you? The attorney said more than likely we would not get anywhere with Child Protective Services. After that initial hearing failed to accomplish anything, we would have to appeal it to the courtroom. The magistrates were state-appointed, meaning the same government entities that paid for CPS to steal our children also appointed and paid the salaries of the magistrates in the courtroom. If one of those magistrates bucked up against other state agencies too often, he would not be reappointed the following year. By the way, before the attorney told us this information, he looked down the hall to make sure no one was listening, closed and locked his door, and said all of this in almost a whisper because he was afraid of getting in trouble for telling us what he knew. He said that hearing would undoubtedly also be in favor of CPS, and we would have to file yet another appeal. He told us several times that the harder we fought with Child Protective Services, the more difficult CPS would make our lives. If you're wondering why my face was blurred out in this video, it was because I have now realized the dangers of Child Protective Services, and I now see that they will go to any extreme to keep people like me from speaking out against their corrupt practices. Throughout America, every day, homes are invaded by the government, who is purposely doing things that they step all over the Constitution. They act like our legal rights don't exist, and they steal children from families who really love those kids and who care for them. Yes, some of those families have made some mistakes, but they're not worthy of having their kids removed from them. I'm not saying that there are not families who are abusive, but I am saying that Child Protective Services seems to be targeting Christian homes, people with conservative values, Christian schools. They seem to be targeting anyone who does not align themselves with their own wicked agendas. What I would like you to do is to purchase a copy of my book, read it, because there's a lot more examples of the corruption of the government throughout my book than what you've heard on this recording. I'd like you to read it and get a full picture of what's going on in our nation. After you do that, I'd like to have you contact some people, contact some senators, some congressional leaders, contact governors and mayors, the news medias. Let them know what's going on here in America. If you do some searches online, you'll find out that I'm not alone. I'm far from being the only person who's had my rights invaded and abused like I've had. You can do something about it. You can make a difference. That's what I'm asking you to do. Please spread the word about my book, because there's not a lot of people out there who are taking a firm stand against CPS. You'll find a few news stations who will post some things and talk about what CPS is doing, but it's usually about one little story. It's not showing the whole picture, and that's what I'm trying to do, is present to you the whole picture of what Child Protective Services and the foster care system is doing in removing children from safe environments and placing them in places where they're in danger. Please stand with me and help stop these illegal practices.